Krishna, Prabhuji and Mataji. Welcome to this morning Mangalarti program. It's a very special program today because this morning we have got His Grace Devakinandan Das Prabhu with us. As we know that he is the foremost disciple of Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Mahavishnu Swami Maharaj. And we know he is a very expert preacher in Srimad Bhagavatam and gives amazing classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam. So we have the opportunity to hear from him. So Devakinandan Prabhu, thank you so much, Prabhu, for being with us. I know you have been always very busy and taken out your time. So over to you, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji. And Hare Krishna to everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Thank you for all of you coming together. And thank you to Abu Dhabi for organizing this wonderful session of studying, reading, and always associating with Srimad Bhagavatam. So Krishna willing, let us look at some nice verses that was given. We are looking at the third canto, 25th chapter, and we'll look at verses 6, 7, and 8. 6 has no purport, but 7 and 8, they have purports, and they run very nicely together. So we should try to study them, and then that would be really nice. Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So thank you, Swayam Smruti Prabhu. So nice to see you. And I hope everyone is healthy and safe. And now let us look at Srimad Bhagavatam. We look at 3, 25, 6. I'll just chant. The Glories of Devotional Service is the title of the chapter. Tam asinam akarmanam tadpamargagra darshanam swasutam devahuti aha datu samsmarati va tam asinam akarmanam tadpamargagra darshanam swasutam devahuti aha datu samsmarati vachaha tam asinam akarmanam tadvamargagradarshanam swasutam devahuti aha datu samsmarati vachaha. I'll read the word to word. Tam, to him, Kapila. Asinam, seated. Akarmanam, at leisure. Tadva, of the absolute truth. Marga agra, the ultimate goal. Darshanam, who could show. Swasutam, her son. Devahutihi, Devahuti. Aha, said. Dhatuhu, of Brahma. Samsmarati, remembering. Vachaha, the words. Translation by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. When Kapila, who could show her the ultimate goal of the absolute truth, was sitting leisurely before her, Devahuti remembered the words Brahma had spoken to her, and she therefore began to question Kapila as follows. Let me read text 7. Devahuti uvacha nirvinna nitaram bhuman asat indriya tarshana yena sambhavyamanena Prapannandham tamaprabho. Devahutihi uvacha. Devahuti said, Nirvinna, disgusted. Nitaram, very. Bhuman, O my Lord. Asat, impermanent. Indriya, of the senses. Tarshanat, from agitation. Yena, by which. Sambhavyamanena, being prevalent, prapanna, I have fallen, andam tamaha, into the abyss of ignorance. Prabho, O my Lord. Translation. Devahuti said, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by my material senses. For because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. Let us hear the purport. Here, the word asat indriya darshanat is significant. Asat means impermanent, temporary, and indriya means senses. Thus, asat indriya darshanat means from being agitated by the temporarily manifest senses of the material body. We are evolving through different statuses of material bodily existence, sometimes in a human body, sometimes in an animal body, and therefore the engagements of our material senses are also changing. Anything which changes is called temporary or asat. We should know that beyond these temporary senses are our permanent senses, which are now covered by the material body. The permanent senses, being contaminated by matter, are not acting properly. Devotional service, therefore, involves freeing the senses from this contamination. When the contamination is completely removed and the senses act in the purity of unalloyed Krishna consciousness, we have reached Sat Indriya, or eternal sensory activities. Eternal sensory activities are called devotional service, whereas temporary sensory activities are called sense gratification. Unless one becomes tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Kapila. I will repeat that line again. Unless one becomes tired of material sense gratification, there is no opportunity to hear transcendental messages from a person like Kapila. Devahuti expressed that she was tired. Now that her husband had left home, she wanted to get relief by hearing the instructions of Lord Kapila. And now I will read text 8 because it is a natural progression from text 7. Text 8. Tasya tvam tamaso andasya dusparasdyadyparagam sachakshu janmanamante labdam me tvat anugraha. Let me read the translation of 3:25:8. Your Lordship is my only means of getting out of this darkest region of ignorance, because you are my transcendental I, which by your mercy only I have attained after many, many births. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. This verse is very instructive, since it indicates the relationship between the spiritual master and the disciple. The disciple or conditioned soul is put into this darkest region of ignorance and therefore is entangled in the material existence of sense gratification. It is very difficult to get out of this entanglement and attain freedom. But if one is fortunate enough to get the association of a spiritual master like Kapila Muni or his representative, then by his grace one can be delivered from the mire of ignorance. The spiritual master is therefore worshipped as one who delivers the disciple from the mire of ignorance with the light of the torch of knowledge. The word paragam is very significant. Paragam refers to one who can take the disciple to the other side. This side is conditioned life, the other side is the life of freedom. The spiritual master takes the disciple to the other side by opening his eyes with knowledge. We are suffering simply because of ignorance. By the instruction of the spiritual master, the darkness of ignorance is removed, and thus the disciple is enabled to go to the side of freedom. It is stated in Bhagavad Gita that after many, many births, one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Similarly, if many, many birds, one is able to find a bona fide spiritual master and surrender to such a bona fide representative of Krishna, one can be taken to the side of light. Om Ajnanatimirantarasya Jnananjana Shalaka Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. This chapter is so nice because it is entitled The Glories of Devotional Service. The glories of devotional service are so powerful, and the glories of devotional service are non different from the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead because they are the same. In this verse, Devahuti and Kadama Muni, because they were so fixed in their devotional service, it did not really affect them, whatever material adjustments they had to be prepared for. But one thing is very nice from what I was saying is that the moment Kadama Muni got married to Devahuti, Devahuti lived like a princess. Don't forget, she was a princess in the sense that she was the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu himself. She lived a life of luxury for so long. But when she got married to Kadama Muni and he led a life of simplicity and renunciation, she gave up all her opulence. And Bhagavatam tells us she became so weak, she became so emaciated because of her austerities. She lost her bodily luster, but that was not foremost in her mind. Bhagavatam tells us the foremost point in her mind was somehow or another to serve her husband. And the important thing here is not only was Devahuti serving a husband, but Bhagavatam tells us she was also serving a great devotee of the Lord. So this is a very important concept that we must remember. When we want to serve someone and that person is a devotee, then even though we may have what we call a material relationship, we should never forget that that person is a devotee. Otherwise, when we take that for granted, it becomes very difficult for us to advance in devotional service. So by serving an exalted and pure devotee like Kardama Muni, Devahuti became spiritually advanced. And this is an important principle for us to keep in mind. So Bhagavatam tells us actually that Kadama Muni was very powerful. And after so many years of austerity that Devahuti was actually doing, he realized after a while that he had actually neglected her. And on that same day, he realized then that he was so pleased with her austerities and her service that he decided now that as a householder, he must also do his duty. So what did he do? Immediately then, he decided that he would change the entire atmosphere. And just like a householder, as he himself had promised to give children to Devahuti, he created a beautiful atmosphere where Devahuti and him lived in an aerial mansion, and they enjoyed so much time as husband and wife. And during that time, he impregnated Devahuti 9 times, and therefore he got 9 daughters from her. When 9 daughters were born to Devahuti at that time, Kadama Muni felt that he had actually fulfilled what he wanted to fulfill. And this is very important because Kadama Muni's point to Brahma, who also had convinced him to take up householder life, and his mood to Swayambhuva Manu when he accepted Devahuti was that once he had given her children, he would actually leave. So he was ready for that. And so when she saw her husband about to leave the house, Devahuti started smiling externally first because she was always pleasing to her husband. But Bhagavatam tells us in her heart, she was actually agitated and distressed. This is very important for us to realize. This happens in the 3rd canto, 23rd chapter, between the verses of 49 to 54. So this context makes us understand the greatness of Devahuti. So as Devahuti began to become agitated and distressed in her heart, it was because of the fact that she was actually going to be bereft of the association of her husband. So Bhagavatam said that she bent her head low. She was standing still and scratching the ground with her foot. She was actually looking very charming, Bhagavatam says, and she spoke with very slow, deliberate motions. And Bhagavatam said that all the time she was trying to suppress her tears. And she told Kadama Muni, "My dear Lord, You have fulfilled all the promises that you gave me, but I am still your surrendered soul. So the one thing I have not got from you is fearlessness. This is very important prayer that Devahuti is putting forward to her husband Kardama. Do not forget that Bhagavatam, Prabhupada says in the purports that the relationship between Kardama and Devahuti is also akin to the relationship between the disciple and the spiritual master. And it's so nice here that Devahuti is saying that while you have fulfilled your promises to me, but there's something that I have not gotten yet. I am a surrendered soul to you, but I still don't have fearlessness. So it is the spiritual master or the great devotees of the Lord who can instill fearlessness in our heart. And what are we fearful of in this world? We are always fearful of losing what we think belongs to us. That is the root of all fear. The greatest fear we have in this world is that we are going to die. And very frankly, even though death is very powerful and frightening experience, another reason why we are afraid we are going to die is because we know we won't take everything we love with us. That is the root cause of our fear. And so Devahuti said, dispel my fear in my heart, and then you can go. And then she said, my daughters are there. They will find their own suitable husbands, and then they will go away to their respective homes. But who will be with me when you will depart as a sannyasi? And then she says something very nice to her husband. She says, my lord, up till now, we have wasted so much time in sense gratification just to get 9 daughters. Because so much time passed, Bhagavatam tells us, when Kardama Muni was trying to satisfy the senses of Devahuti. Prabhupada writes very nicely and speaks in his lectures that when we are trying to gratify our senses, time always flies. It always flies. But when you want to sit down and read Bhagavatam, you'll find, oh, I'm looking at the time hasn't gone yet. Because we are relishing material sense enjoyment, but very seldom do we relish spiritual enjoyment. If we sat down with Bhagavatam for 7-8 hours, and if we could relish it, then we would really have higher taste. So Devahuti was lamenting, my dear husband, we have wasted our time and we have neglected to enhance our spiritual knowledge of the Supreme Lord. So you can see that even though she wanted to have children, but her real mood was devotional. And then she says something very nice in text 54 of that chapter. She says, I did not realize your transcendental situation, my Lord. I have loved you very much, but I have actually been attached to the objects of the senses. But I'm praying now that somehow let my affinity to you help me get rid of all this fear. It's a very nice point that she's giving. So sometimes we may be in relationships with devotees, like husband, wife, and children. And sometimes, even after many years with the spiritual master, our association, if we are not careful on our side, could become material. We may lose the fact of taking that person for granted as someone exalted. So that's why Devahuti then said something very important for us. It is in the 3rd canto, 23rd chapter, the verse is 55. Sangoya samstrite hetu asatsu vihito diya sa eva sadhushu krito nisangatvaya kalpate. The translation is very nice. She says, association for sense gratification is certainly the path of bondage. And that's the sum total of our class today. In the verse after the 6th verse, in the 7th verse, Prabhupada writes, how when our senses are temporary and they are asat, what happens is they actually bind us to this world. So Devahuti is saying, when we associate with each other for sense gratification, we become bound to this world. But that same type of association, when it is performed with a saintly person, it leads us to the path of liberation, even if performed without knowledge. This is such a nice point. Srila Prabhupada elaborates in the purport. Prabhupada says, the association of a saintly person in any way will always bear the same results. Krishna met so many people, Prabhupada writes in the purport. Some treated him as enemy. Some treated him as an agent for sense gratification. The gopis were very attached to Krishna as a conjugal lover. And yet Prabhupada says they became first-class devotees of Krishna. Why? Because their whole object was to satisfy Krishna. Prabhupada says even Sishupal, Dantavaktra, Kamsa, they were actually enemies of Krishna. But even then, by associating with him, even though it was unfavorable, they somehow got liberation. So in the purport to 323.55, Prabhupada says, even if one does not understand the position of the Lord, the results have the same efficacy. The results have the same efficacy. Association with a great saintly person always results in liberation. Just like Prabhupada says, even if you know the power of fire knowingly or unknowingly, the fire will make one warm. Isn't it true? And therefore, Devahuti was expressing her gratitude to Karnama. She was telling him that actually, even though I associated with you as a husband, but you have actually given me spiritual knowledge. So now, if you leave me, what will happen? Where will I go? This is a very important point. So, this is something we should keep in mind. The greatness and power of association of the Lord. Even if our senses are asat, Bhagavatam tells us that even if the senses are asat, we have to bring our senses from asat to sat. And that is an important principle. So Bhagavatam tells us that Devahuti Mata understood the importance of sadhu sangha. Very important point. She understood the importance of sadhu sangha. And that is why she could understand the human form of life is valuable. Prabhupada writes in the purport that we have a choice. We have a choice between sense gratification and self-realization. But if we understand the human form of life and its value, then we will understand that our real purpose of life is to move from asat to sat. Asat means temporary, but sat means always permanent. This body will go, but our consciousness will always remain. But if the consciousness remains with the body, then we come back again to suffer again in this temporary body. What is that nice verse? 11:9-29 of Srimad Bhagavatam. There it is very nicely stated. What is that? Labda sudullabhamidam bahusambhavante manusya martada manityamapiha dhira turnam yateta napatet anumrityu yavan nishreyasaya vishaya halu sarvatasya. This verse is very important verse for us because it tells us the value of the human form of life. After many, many births and death, we may achieve this form of life which is considered rare. But even though this body is temporary, our sastras tell us this body gives us an opportunity. An opportunity is actually Krishna. Another name for opportunity is Samanjasa. Krishna is the source of all opportunities. So Krishna gives us this sharir. That's why we're sitting with WebEx now. If we were animals, we wouldn't be sitting with WebEx right now talking to each other. Because we value the rarity of this human form. And even though it is temporary, it's giving us a chance to attain what is called the highest perfection. So that's why Bhagavatam tells us we must be sober in our attitude. And we must understand that sense gratification is available even to the most abominable species of life. So, Krishna consciousness is the separation between animal life and human life. Let us never forget that point. And that is why Devahuti was asking Kadama Muni for this very important point. Please, somehow or another, don't leave me. Then my daughters will leave. You will also leave. I am fearful. Where will I go? And how will I then understand the value of this life? This is what she's asking. And in text 6, you'll understand something very important. Before text 6 comes, right, at that point of time, after she had asked Devahuti, she had actually asked Kadama Muni this point. Kadama Muni then decides to tell her a very important point. He tells her that in your womb, my dear wife, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his plenary portion has already taken root. And he will come out as the great Kapila Deva. So I'm not leaving you bereft of anything. You will definitely be guided by your son, who is non-different from the Supreme Personality. So Kadama Muni shows us the value of a spiritual master. If somehow or another, Prabhus and Matajis, we become surrendered at the lotus feet of the spiritual master, if somehow, like Devahuti, we become surrendered in his service, day in and day out, without consideration of our own material benefits, then the result, you see the result. Kadama Muni satisfied and gave her all that she lacked by giving her an aerial mansion, by giving her 9 daughters, by giving her some satisfaction of the senses as a husband should satisfy the wife. He did not make her lack anything. Krishna consciousness is like that. Very nicely, it is stated in 922 of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says, Ananyas chintayantu mam ye janaha paripasate vesham nitya abhiyuktanam yogakshemam bahamyaham. For those who are exclusively devoted in devotional service to Krishna, or to those who are exclusively devoted to the service of the spiritual master who is the bona fide representative of Krishna, then Krishna guarantees Arjuna 2 things. Whatever that you lack, I will give, and whatever that you have, I will preserve. So Kadama Muni was telling Devahuti that never, do not think that I will leave you with no opulence. I will give you the greatest opulence because you have served me and you have surrendered to me. And this is really nice point. And that is why Devahuti became satisfied in the heart. And so Kapila Dev was born. And the moment he was born, when Kadama Muni realized that Kapila Dev is non-different from the Supreme Lord, he then bowed, sought permission from Kapila Dev, who gave him permission to now surrender from family life and take up renounced life. And he left. And this is where we are now, in the 6th verse. And in this 6th verse, so nicely it is stated that Kapila Dev stayed with his mother. This is the beauty of Krishna. You know? Krishna comes as son, he comes as a friend. But one thing that Krishna does, that this material world doesn't do, Krishna stays with us. Nothing in this world stays with us, Prabhus and Matas. They all go. That is why Prabhupada says, anything in this world you become attached to is asat. It will leave us. Even the sharir will leave us. When this body is put on the fire to burn, even the sharir cannot go with the soul. It has to be left as cremated remains or as buried remains. But Krishna stays with us. So the spiritual master is the external manifestation of the Lord. And the duty of the spiritual master is to bring his disciple to the lotus feet of the Lord. And that is exactly what Kadama Muni did. He himself was a surrendered soul. And he guided his wife so nicely as his disciple. And he brought her to his son, who is actually the Supreme Personality. And now Kadama Muni left. And Bhagavatam tells us that one day, as Mother Devahuti was sitting down, and she was seeing her son, and he was there sitting leisurely with her, suddenly she remembered the words of Brahma. What are these words? Suddenly the words of Brahma came. She recalled the words of Brahma. In the 3rd canto, a bit earlier, I think, sometime in the 24th chapter, before this chapter, 3:24, 18 and 19, the words of Brahma are very important to understand the context of the verses today. Brahmaji, when he met Kadama and Devahuti after they got married, he turned to her specifically and he told her like a grandfather, because Manu was his father, right? Was the father of Devahuti. And so grandfather was Brahma. So like a loving grandfather, he turned to Devahuti, his granddaughter, and he said, my dear daughter of Manu, that same Supreme Personality of Godhead who killed the demon Kaitaba is now within your womb. And he will cut off all the knots of your ignorance and doubt. 2 things we must always be careful of in this material world. One is ignorance, and the other is doubt. When we are in asat, when we are attached to that which is temporary, which is not permanent, then Bhagavatam tells us 2 things will touch us. We will always be in ignorance. And where there is ignorance, we will always doubt. Sometimes we take up Krishna consciousness and we wonder why I'm doubting so much. Because we must really introspect and say, while we have worn the clothes of Krishna consciousness, while we are following the rituals of Krishna consciousness, have we practiced Krishna consciousness? Have we understood the essence of Krishna consciousness, which is actually to purify our senses? So this point is very important. And that was the prediction of Brahma. And then Brahma said, your son will be the head of all perfected souls. He will be approved by the acharyas, and he will be celebrated all over the world as the son of Devahuti. And he will increase your favor. He will increase your favor. So this is such a nice point we must remember. So if you understand one thing here, you realize that Brahma was actually assuring Devahuti that this marriage will not be unbeneficial. Because you are surrendered to a great devotee of the Lord, and you are taking this association as a spiritual master, not just as a husband, but a spiritual master, then your lenses are different. And that's why he will benedict you with the son who is non-different from the Supreme Personality. But notice one thing here. After Kadama left, for a few days, you'll find that Kapila Dev was just sitting there, and he was just there to protect his mother. He never started speaking to her about the Supreme Absolute Truth. He did not. It is only when Devahuti started recalling, wait a minute, Brahma had told me something, that my son is non-different from Krishna. Then what did she do? Then Bhagavatam tells us so nicely here that then she decided that she will speak and question Kapila. That's what the verse tells us actually. And then verse 7 begins. And then Devahuti expresses an important point. She says, I am sick of the disturbance caused by material senses. The point we are trying to make here is, it was Devahuti who voluntarily approached the lotus feet of her son for transcendental knowledge. It was not Kapila Dev who came and said, now mother, I must instruct you in transcendental knowledge. He didn't do that. Why? Because 434 of Bhagavad Gita tells us, Tad vidi pranipatena, pariprashnena sevaya. It is the disciple who must sincerely approach the spiritual master. It is the etiquette of our parampara that even though the spiritual master is available to all, he will test the dedication of the disciple. And the disciple passes the first test by making that voluntary effort to actually approach the spiritual master. That is why in Bhagavatam, voluntary, sincere endeavor towards devotional service is the only qualification for spiritual perfection. This is actually a line that comes from Srila Prabhupada's purport in the third canto, 9 chapter, 38 verse. 3, 9, 38. It is very nicely stated there that by the mercy of the Lord, even a layman can compose prayers of the highest spiritual perfection. And this spiritual perfection is not limited to material qualifications. Devahuti did not materially qualify herself to become spiritually advanced. All she had in her heart now was sincerely wanting to ask her son for transcendental knowledge. So we should never wait for Guru to come to us. We should always run after Guru. And even if our spiritual master is not physically present with us, we must still run after him. How? My Guru Maharaj said that even after I leave, Devaki, you should always run after my instructions. This is how he said it. And I really like the way Maharaj put it. That there is no difference actually. During my lifetime, you run after me to follow my instructions. And after my lifetime, you run after my instructions to follow me. Such a beautiful point. And that is the beauty of what Kadama Muni gave Devahuti. He blessed her with spiritual knowledge because she was a sincere disciple. And now she became a sincere disciple of her son. And she herself voluntarily asked him. And now she expresses a very important point. And this is how a disciple approaches a spiritual master. The disciple approaches a spiritual master and presents the challenge that he or she is facing. And what did Devahuti say? Devahuti said, my Lord, I am very sick of the disturbance caused by the material senses. Because of this sense disturbance, my Lord, I have fallen into the abyss of ignorance. When Sanatan Goswami approached Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was such a scholar already. He was such a realized soul. And what did he tell Mahaprabhu? He put a straw between his teeth and sat and bowed before Mahaprabhu. And he said, "My dear Lord, I am such a foolish personality. I don't know why. I don't know the value of life. I don't know the purpose of life. Kindly tell me the goal of life." This is Sanatan Goswami asking. So a sincere disciple presents his disqualification because that is a symbol of his humility. And look at Devahuti's humility. Even though she had served and she was such an exalted daughter of Swayambhu Manu and a great devotee, she expressed that she was very tired and very sick of the disturbances of the material senses. And this is the first step in approaching the spiritual master. And this is a very nice point. Because in Bhagavatam, when you read the verse, there are three word to words that actually express the word that Prabhupada uses. Prabhupada used the word, "I am very sick." But when you look at the word to word, what did she mean by being sick? Nirvinna. Nirvinna means she was disgusted. So if we want to take up spiritual life, we must actually come to a point when we become disgusted with this material world. Not disgusted in the sense of I'm very proud, I'm devotee, and you're very nonsense. No. Disgusted because we realize that our senses are always giving us trouble. So there must be an element of disgust for us to renounce this sense gratification. The second word that he uses is vitaram, very, not just disgusted, but very disgusted. And then he translates this very nice word, tarshanat. Tarshanat means agitation. So actually, when the material senses are not under our control, they become uncontrolled. Then they will drag us to asat, where we become attached to all that is temporary. And then we become disturbed. Because that which is temporary cannot be permanent. Imagine trying to hold on to something that you want to be secure, and that thing itself is not secure. How will you be secure? This is how, like monkeys, we are moving from one tree to the other tree, and never is there a branch which is stable. And that's why we keep moving and moving. So Devahuti said, "I've become sick of this movement. I've become disgusted, very disgusted. Why? Because this kind of disturbance is causing me agitation, tarshana." That's why Prabhupada says, "Asat Indriya Tarshana" is significant. Whenever we attach ourselves to something impermanent, please understand that you will become disturbed. What is that verse? 1.5.14 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Tato anyatha kinchana yad vivekshataha pritat drishashtat pritarupanamavihi na karhichit kwapi cha tushtita matihi labe tavata hatanau ivaspadam. Narada Muni says emphatically to Vyasadeva, "Please know, my dear Vyasadeva, why are you disturbed at this moment? You are disturbed because you have done everything except become attached to the glorification of the Lord. Therefore, whatever you have described is asat, because there is no Krishna. And whatever that you have described which is not aligned to Krishna, which is not in line with what Krishna wants, in some way or the other, when it interacts with name, form, what will happen is it will cause you dushtita. It will cause your mind to oscillate. And it is just like a boat which is not anchored to the land. It will always be moving and moving in the waters and never become still. So Devahuti became fed up of that. This is such a nice point. When the material senses attack us, Prabhus and Mataji's, they are so powerful that Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam tell us that if we cannot control them, very quickly from Sat, a life of devotional service, we can go very quickly into a life of disturbed material sense gratification. This point is actually brought by Prahlad Maharaj in the 7th canto, 9th chapter, 40th verse. Our Guru Maharaj liked this verse very much because he said, if you want to understand how uncontrolled senses are, Then Prahlad Maharaj brings up this verse for us. Jivai kato achuta virta sati ma vipritha Shishno yatasta udaram shravanam kutasche Prano yatascha paladrikvacha karma shakti Bhavya sapatya iva deva patim vinanti. The translation is very nice. Prahlad Maharaj says, my dear Lord, my position is like a person who has many wives. So Maharaj was saying, one wife is already a challenge, and one husband is also a challenge. But Prahlad Maharaj says, a person who has many wives, they are all trying to attract him in their own way. They're trying to attract him in their own way. In the same way, Prahlad Maharaj says, this tongue is attracting you to palatable dishes. The genitals is attracting you to sex with an attractive woman. The sense of touch is attracting you to touch soft things. This belly, it's already filled. You have prasadam, but it still wants to eat more and more and more. This ear, instead of hearing about Krishna, is generally attracted to cinema songs. If you read the translation, Prabhupada puts there cinema songs. And Maharaj laughed and laughed. He said, see, this is what Prabhupada is telling us. This sense of smell, instead of being attracted to Krishna, is attracted to the other side. And these restless eyes, instead of being attracted to Krishna, they're just attracted to scenes of sense gratification. And like this, all your senses, Prahlad Maharaj says, they drag you everywhere. So you think you're finished with one, you have to go to another. You think you're finished with that, you go to another. And Prahlad Maharaj says, in this way, my dear Lord, I have certainly become embarrassed. I'm embarrassed. And that's why our acharyas tell us, when we cannot control our senses, then it is known as asat indriya darshana. Because they are temporary, they will take us everywhere. But everywhere that we go is never a resting place. Never a resting place. I think 260 of Bhagavad Gita tells us, isn't it? Yatato hi api kaunteya purushasya vipaschitaha indriyani pramatini haranti prasabham manaha. The senses are so strong and they're so impetuous that they will just forcibly carry the mind, even of a man of discrimination. So Devahuti is surrendering herself to Kapila Devi. She's telling Kapila that I cannot control my senses. This admittance, this admission based on humility, of understanding our true attachment to sense gratification, is the starting point to becoming disgusted with material. Until we do that, we will not be exhausted. And that is why it is very important to understand how Devahuti was presenting her prayer to Krishna. So this is the result of uncontrolled senses. It is so powerful. And this verse of 7:15:19, 7:9:40 that I told you, you please study it. Because it tells us how even the senses don't cooperate with each other. And that is why our whole body eventually becomes very tired. Dehendra prana mano diyamyo janma priya shud vayatarsha kriche samsara dharme avimuyamanaha smritya hari bhagavata pradhanaha. Exhaustion of the senses will come if we follow the senses. Because as Prahlad Maharaj says, each of your senses will not even cooperate with the other. Each one of them will tug you to one corner. And 11:249 of Srimad Bhagavatam tells us, this material body will always subject you to birth and death. So that's one challenge. This life air, prana, will always harass you with hunger and thirst. The moment you finish prasadam, 2 hours later you'll be hungry. Sometimes within 2 hours you want to eat. This mind, Bhagavatam tells us, will always harass you with anxiety. This intelligence, Bhagavatam tells us, will always tell you to run after that which you cannot obtain because it is temporary. And ultimately, all these senses will become what we call karsha, no, shud, bhaya, karsha, no, shud, bhaya, karsha, krichai. Krichai. Kricha in Bhagavatam means the pain of exertion. The pain of exertion. So in the end, Devahuti is expressing the same point about that if we try to run after our senses, if we try to run after satisfying every single personality in this world, you'll find you cannot. Even your senses cannot be cooperative. How will the people around you cooperate? By nature, they will not cooperate. And by nature, your senses will not cooperate. And by the time you become so exhausted, your body also will not cooperate. So if you follow the path of asat, then Bhagavatam tells us you will become Muya. You will become Muya Manaha. Muya Manaha means you become devoted. But Devahuti now is surrendering to the spiritual master Kapila Deva. So what is she asking? She's saying, I've fallen into the abyss, the well of ignorance. Now you do one thing. You give me the eye of transcendental knowledge. So for one who is actually always at the lotus feet of the spiritual master and the supreme personality of God, that person is known in 11.249 as Bhagavata Pradana. Why? Smritya Harihe Bhagavata Pradana. And why is that person not touched by the bewilderment of the world? Because he understands one thing. Samsara dharmai. He understands that this nature of the world is asat indriya darshan. The nature of this world is that it is always untruthful. One point that Guru Maharaj brought up about the word asat. Asat just not only means temporary, but that which is temporary will never be the supreme absolute truth. In other words, that which is temporary will always cheat us. This is a very deep point to think about. Krishna is not temporary. Therefore, Krishna will never cheat us. But if you hold on to the tail of a dog and cross the ocean, the dog is temporary. Dog's way of swimming the ocean is also temporary. Eventually, the dog will drown. And because you hold on to something temporary, you become cheated. So that is why if we become attached to this material world and not to the spiritual world, then we will be cheated in this world. So asat, the effect of asat, the effect of temporariness is that you will be cheated. But the effect of holding on to devotional service is that you will remain aloof of this material. Smritya Harehe Bhagavata Pradana. In other words, Smritya means because of your remembrance of the Lord, you are not devoted. And that is the prayer of Devahuti to her wonderful and divine son. So this is a very important point. There is another verse in Bhagavatam that is a warning verse to us. If we are greedy and running after our uncontrolled senses, then Bhagavatam tells us, I think it is Narada Muni who tells Yudhishthira Maharaj in the 7th canto, 15th chapter, 19th verse. Asantushtasya viprasya tejo vidya tapo yashaha shravanti indriya launena jnanam chaiva abhinyate. The meaning is very important. It is stated in Bhagavatam by Narada Muni. Because someone runs after their senses in a greedy way, what will happen? When a devotee or a brahmana is running after his senses in an uncontrolled way, when, as Prahlad Maharaj says, this sense runs here, you run there, that sense runs here, you run there, like a madman we run, then what happens? Spiritual strength, whatever sadhana that we have, it starts to diminish because now we are attracted to sense gratification. We stop doing our chanting. We don't concentrate on Bhagavatam. We don't associate with devotees. So our spiritual strength will go. Whatever education we have from Bhagavatam will also go. Whatever austerity we have to wake up for Mangalarti will go. And eventually our reputation also will go. Why? Because we are not self-satisfied. Asantushtasya. Therefore, the way to come out of asat is to become self-satisfied with whatever Krishna has given. Otherwise, Bhagavatam tells us our transcendental knowledge will dwindle. And once it dwindles, then we go into the abyss of ignorance that Devahuti Mata is talking about. So this is a very important point that we should know. And at this stage, I'm just remembering one very important episode from Bhagavatam, which tells us that. It is the episode of Puranjana, if you remember. In Puranjana's story, which is actually the story for all of us, this is a story told by Narada Muni to King Prachina Bhargisi. Narada wanted to explain to the king how much engrossed he was in running after Asat Indriya. He was running after impermanent enjoyment. But Narada wanted to tell him in a sweet way. So he told him a story. Sometimes devotees are not so direct. Sometimes they tell you in a roundabout way, trying to save you some face. And that's what Narada did. So Narada said, once upon a time, there was a man and his name was Puranjana. And Prabhupada says, actually, we are all Puranjanas. Puranjana means hero. And Prabhupada says, we always think we are also heroes. Actually. And we think that nothing can touch us. We are infallible. Now, this Puranjana was going all over this world just to look for a place where he could enjoy his senses. And Prabhupada says that's what we always do. Every endeavor we take, we're only looking out, how can I enjoy myself? It is only when we come to Krishna consciousness that our consciousness changes. Our consciousness changes in such a way that we think, how will the Lord be pleased? How will the spiritual master be pleased? How will the devotees be pleased? At every step, if we can ask ourselves that question, automatically we will not be in Asat Indriya. We will be in Sat. So, Puranjana was not like that. But Bhagavatam says that Puranjana had a very good friend. His name was Avinyataha. Avinyataha means one who is unknown, imperceptible. He's actually the super soul in our hearts. For years and years and life after, Krishna has always been in our heart as super soul. But if we are caught up in sense gratification, we forget him. But when we start taking up the process of spiritual purification, then we hear Krishna. But Avinyata never gave up on Puranjana, even though Puranjana was just ignoring Avinyata all the time. So he looked for a place, a city of unlimited enjoyment. And one day he found such a city. Bhagavatam tells us that city was a city of 9 gates. And in every gate there was untold and immeasurable sense of joy. It was a beautiful looking city. So he walked into that city. And there he saw a very beautiful maiden. Bhagavatam tells us that maiden was moving around with a big entourage. She had 10 servants behind her. And each servant had 100 wives accompanying her. And Bhagavatam tells us that this lady represents intelligence. When intelligence is not guided by the soul, when intelligence is not guided by devotional service, it becomes misguided intelligence. It doesn't know where to go, like this lady. And so even though it is very attractive, it doesn't know where to go. And so we become attracted to that intelligence which is misguided, and we also become misguided. So the 10 servants, and there was an 11th maid servant, the chief maid servant, that is considered to be the mind. And the 10 servants are the 5 knowledge gathering senses and the 5 direct working senses. And they are all gathering behind the mind. And each one of them have hundreds and hundreds of servants. Why? Because every one of these senses together with the mind will produce hundreds and hundreds of sounds. And behind all of them, Puranjana saw a large 5-hooded snake. It was the protector of the city. And the 5-hooded snake represents the 5 airs that are in our bodies. Apana, Dhyana, Samana, Udana. These are all, and Prana, of course. These are the vital airs. So this body is actually the city of the 9 gates. And when intelligence is not attached to Krishna, it becomes misguided. So Puranjana became attracted to the lady, and the lady became attracted to Puranjana. He asked her for a hand in marriage, and she readily complied. And together for 100 years, Bhagavatam says, they lived a life of gratification and sense enjoyment. Every day, Puranjana would go to each gate, which are actually the 2 eyes, 1 mouth, right? The 2 nose, 2 ears we have, the nostrils, The rectum, the genitals, these are all the different 9 gates. And every day of our life, if we don't have Krishna, we think that we can experience some pleasure from these gates. But we realize that actually we don't. Puranjana tried very hard to enjoy. But every day when he enjoyed and he thought that was enough, the next day he would come asking for more because he was never satisfied. He tried very hard to satisfy his wife, but misguided intelligence can never be satisfied. And so when his wife was sad, he became sad. When she was angry, he became angry. When she was morose, he became morose. And in that way, he became implicated in the abyss of ignorance, forgetting the true value of his life. Bhagavatam says, through his wife, he begot 1,000 sons and 110 daughters, and they all represent unlimited desires. And these unlimited desires are so powerful that they implicate us in other desires and other desires. And one day, when Puranjana thought that he was living a life of great bliss, from Gandharva Loka, there was a great king known as Chandavega. Chandavega actually means time. And this is the problem with Asat Indriya Darshana. Because that which is temporary must end, no matter what sense enjoyment we have, it must end. And that is why we should become disgusted with the temporary nature of this world. If we do not come out of the temporary nature of the world, it will catch us in the way Puranjana was caught. Because Chandavega decided, let me invade the city of the 9 gates. And the moment he is time, that means the time for enjoyment has ended. Chandavega came with 360 powerful Gandharva soldiers, and they all represent each day of the year. And when they came, they invaded the city. Chandavega plundered the city, and the serpent fought very hard to defend it. The battle was very long, and then Chandavega unleashed a powerful force in the city. It was actually his daughter, and her name was Jara. Jara means old age. How long can we enjoy our senses? The hair is going, the teeth will become false, and eventually we can't even hear what we are speaking. And yet we think we still want to enjoy. Like Prahlad Maharaj says, the senses still bring us everywhere. We still become bewildered. Puranjana tried to still enjoy, even though the body and the city was going to be caught. And therefore Chandavega sent Jara. And the moment this lady Jara walked into the city, because of old age, all the soldiers and even the powerful snake also became very weak, because that is what happens to us. Jara walked into the city looking for a husband. But then, another name for old age is Durvaga. Durvaga means ill-fated. And so she tried to approach the king of the Yavanas known as Bhaya. But he did not want to be the husband of Jara. So she introduced actually another personality. And his name is Prajwara. Prajwara is the fever. The fever, Bhagavatam tells us, that approaches our body at the point of death. Prabhupada writes in Bhagavatam, at the point of death, your senses cannot take the force of this fever. It reaches 107 degrees, Prabhupada writes. And at that point, all the senses become completely fried. That's why Maharaj said, before our senses become so disgusted by the force of age and death, we should learn to be disgusted with this material world when we can use these senses now for Krishna's service. That is the essence of the prayer of Devaki to her son. Do not let me fall into the abyss of ignorance, but like a spiritual master, deliver me from this ignorance. And so, Puranjana was left bereft of all his enjoyment. And the moment Bhaya came, fear, the moment Jara was there, old age, the moment her husband Prajwara came, then the entire city collapsed. It was put on fire, and the serpent also perished in the fire. Puranjana, in his last moments of life, instead of remembering the goal of life and who Krishna is, instead of remembering his old friend Avinyataha, who did he remember? He remembered his wife. He remembered his wife. That's why Guru Maharaj used to tell us, Krishna is very clear at the point of your death, what consciousness you have, that consciousness you attain. So if you want to leave the world remembering your wife, next life you become Sari. If you want to leave the world remembering your husband, next life you become Dhoti. So if you want to just change between Dhoti and Sari and keep coming back to the world, then you will keep suffering. Instead of that, remember the lotus feet of Krishna and remember the lotus feet of the spiritual master. That word that Prabhupada says so nicely is paragam. Paragam means it is the lotus feet of the Lord and the spiritual master that can deliver us from one end of the ocean of material birth and death to the other end of the spiritual kingdom of God. And that boat is actually the lotus feet of the spiritual master. And that the wings, that boat is our body. Bhagavatam tells us that body is a suitable boat to cross this ocean, Aragam. And that wonderful captain of this boat, who is that captain? That captain is the spiritual master. So we must make our spiritual master and Srila Prabhupada the captain of our lives. We must make sure that our spiritual master is the person who steers our boat in the right direction. If we allow our senses to steer our boat, imagine today the boat will go east, in the same day the boat will go west, then north and south, and in the end the boat will never leave its position and be stuck in the ocean of material birth and death. But if we take up Krishna consciousness and surrender to the spiritual master, then Bhagavatam assures us that the captain of the ship, being the spiritual master, he will guide us. And the sails, because the boat sails, the sails catch wind. And that sails are the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sail and the winds. And with the captain directing us, we are no longer in the abyss of ignorance. We are no longer in the situation of asat indriya tarshana. We are no longer nirvinna, meaning disgusted. And we are no longer in the position of tarshana, being agitated. So unfortunately for Puranjana, he died remembering his wife. And so in the next life, he became Puranjani. But see, Avinyataha never forgot him. And that's the beauty of our spiritual master. Our spiritual masters never forget us. And because they never forget us, they always claim us. So at the end of her life, Puranjani served her husband Mayala Dwaj very nicely. And because he was a great devotee of the Lord, in the same way, Devahuti served her husband. In the same way, Puranjani served her husband. In the same way, a disciple served the spiritual master. And so at the point when the spiritual master leaves his body, it is not cause for lamentation because his instructions are with us. And because he has instructed us and we have held on to his instructions very tightly, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the form of Avinyata came to Puranjani and guided her to give her self-realization. And this is how, Prabhus and Matajis, we should take up spiritual life. Prabhupada says that we must come from asat to sat. When the spiritual master gives us this revelatory knowledge of Bhagavatam, it becomes Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya. That torchlight that lights up and dissipates darkness. Dhruva Maharaj felt it also in Bhagavatam. In 496 of Bhagavatam, he was meditating so much on Krishna. But why did he meditate on Krishna? Because he followed the instructions of his spiritual master, Narada. And why did he come to the forest to meditate on Krishna? Because he followed the instructions of his spiritual master, Suniti. See, one who follows the instructions of the spiritual master will always succeed in being enlivened in his senses by the Supreme Personality of God. Dhruva Maharaj heard Suniti, and then he went to the forest and heard Narada. And when Narada blessed him, he followed the instructions very nicely by chanting Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. And then the Lord appeared before him. And when the Lord appeared, Dhruva Maharaj was spellbound. His senses up to that point were there, but they were in asat. But because of the mercy of the spiritual master, Krishna then reciprocated with Dhruva. and touched him with his conch shell on his shoulder. And the moment he touched him, Dhruva Maharaj then chanted, Yuntaha pravishya mama vacham imam prasuttam sanjeevayati akhila sakti dhara swadhamna anyamscha hasta charana shravana tvagadim prana namo bhagavate purushaya tubhyam. How nice this verse is. Dhruva Maharaj says, my dear Lord, you are so powerful. Up till now, my senses were not enlivened. They were dead. But the moment you touched me, you have revived me, enlivened me. Sanjeevayati. Sanjeevayati means rejuvenate. It means resurrect. And you have given me Shakti Daraha. You have given me your energy. And now my hands, my legs, my ears, my touch sensation, my life force, especially my vacha, instead of being in asat, now they are now in sat. So I am no longer disturbed. I am no longer in the abyss of ignorance. And this is what devotional service is. So the process in conclusion is very simple. To move from material senses to spiritual senses is not it's not magic. Prabhupada uses the word eternal sensory activities. Eternal sensory activities simply means, Prabhupada says, sincere practice of devotional service under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. That is the logical conclusion of Devadeva. Why? Sarva upadi vinirmuktam tat paratvena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti uchyate. It is nicely stated that devotional service simply means engaging all our senses in the service of the Lord. That same sense which is asat immediately becomes sat. And because Krishna is Rishikesha, all the senses become protected and directed. And then what happens? This is medicine. So always medicine has side effects, right? So if you follow this bhakti process, there are also two side effects, but they are good side effects. One, you become free from the material designations. And that means you become free of the material senses attached. Why? Because you become aloof from them. You do not walk away from them. That is artificial renunciation. You use them. So no designations for devotees. And the second one that is really nice, one's senses become purified simply by employing it in the service. That's why Kunti Mata said, Shrunavanti Gayanti, Prananti Abhikshnashaha, Smaranti Nandanti, Tavehitam Janaha, Naeva Pashyanti, Achirena Tavakam, Bhava Pravaho, Paramam Padam. We should chant these verses with feeling. Nai varhati abhidhatum vai. Kunti Mata says that when we are so attached to our janma, aishwarya, to our shruta, education, shribir, our wealth, our beauty, then those things catch our senses. And we cannot chant Krishna's names and perform our service to our spiritual master with feeling. Devotional service is only heart-to-heart transaction. It is nothing else actually. If we put our hearts into it, like Devahuti put a heart to serve Kardama, and then she put a heart to listen to Kapila. That is the qualification. Otherwise, we are not materially exhausted. Then we become materially attached. Just like Gajendra became materially exhausted of being held, for 1,000 years. We don't have 1,000 years, Prabhus and Matavis. We don't know when we are going to leave. So immediately we should take this advantage of this process. We should do what Gajendra did. What did he do? In 831, this is what he did. This is what it means to actually have the eternal sensory activity. Evam vyavasito buddhya samadhaya manohriti jajapa paramam japam prabjanmani anushikshitam. The king of the elephants, Gajendra, fixed his mind in his heart with perfect intelligence. He chanted a mantra which he had learned from the previous poem and which he remembered now by the grace of Krishna. The whole formula is given in this. If we follow the instructions of the spiritual master, if we become disgusted and introspect on how we are suffering in this world because we're always running after that which is temporary, then by Krishna's grace and Guru's grace, if we approach them in surrendered fashion like they would, then they will lovingly reciprocate. And how will they reciprocate? By their grace, we will be able to remember the instructions of the Lord. Just like Gajendra remembered. Just like Devahuti remembered the instructions of Brahma and then approached her son. See, they're all similar. And then what will happen? Devotional service is fixed in the heart. And then intelligence, unlike Puranjana, will not run more and more. It will be fixed. And therefore, by the grace of the Supreme Spiritual Master Krishna, we will be able to come out of this abyss of ignorance. So that is why Prabhus and Matajis, in conclusion, we should remember that we should always pray very seriously at the lotus feet of the devotees. No material qualification attracts these great devotees. The illiterate Brahmana, if you remember, what happened to him? He could not even read the Bhagavad Gita. But his spiritual master told him, read it. He was not so smart to say, how can I read it? I'm uneducated. That means he had no faith. But because he had faith in the spiritual master, all knowledge of the Gita was revealed to him. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he saw this Brahmana who was illiterate, he declared to the world that this Brahmana is actually fully qualified. This Brahmana is a true devotee because he's a sincere disciple. So this is the point for us to understand. And we should end with a prayer by Prahlad Maharaj. Prahlad Maharaj has beautiful prayers, to the spiritual master. And Prahlad Maharaj's prayer so nicely captures the purport of Srila Prabhupada in text 8 today. He says so nicely in this prayer, I think it is the 28th verse in the 7th and 9th chapter. Evam janam nipatitam prabhavahi kupe kama bikamam anuya praputanta sangha kritva masatsu rashina bhagavan rahitaha soham katam nu visaje tava vritta sevam. And this should be our prayer before we end today. My dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of my association with material desires, asat sangha, one after another, I was gradually falling into a blind well full of snakes, just following the general populace. But your servant Narada Muni, he kindly accepted me as his disciple, and he instructed me on how to achieve this transcendental position. Therefore, my Lord, my first duty is to serve him, my spiritual. How can I ever leave service? Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Jai Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Gurudev, Ananta Kodi Vaishnavindati, Nitai Gaur. Thank you very much, Swayam Spruti Prabhu,
Thank you, Prabhu.
having us over. And it's so nice to see Vaishnava Seva Prabhu. Thank you so much for joining us, Prabhu.
Thank you, thank you.
Us with the Maharaj is
So, Hare Krishna, Prabhujan Mataji, before we end, is there any devotee has got any questions or comments?
There is a question in the chat box.
I'm looking at it now, Prabhu. Did Kadama Muni did he expand into 9 personalities with his yogic power, at the same time keeping his spiritual body undisturbed? Nice question. The point is that how was Kadama Muni able to actually expand himself into 9 forms to satisfy Devahuti Mata and yet remain so undisturbed in his spiritual life? He did that because, as you alluded to, Prabhu, while he was performing his prescribed duty as a householder, but his mind, his heart, and his consciousness was always engrossed in the remembrance of the Lord. And that can be only achieved by the blessings of the spiritual master. And how did he achieve that mercy? Because even though Kadama Muni did not want to get married, he followed the instructions of his spiritual master Brahma. When Brahma told him to become married, he did not artificially renounce it. And that was what was the state of Arjuna in the beginning also. He wanted to artificially renounce fighting. But when he realized that it would satisfy Brahmaji if he got married, that ability and attempt, sincere attempt to satisfy the spiritual master, protected Kadama's consciousness. And that is the reason why he was able never to be touched by whatever sense gratification that he apparently had to indulge in the execution of his ashram. So it is not just his yogic power that's important. He had that mystic yogic power. But his consciousness was protected because he was a devotee. That is very important. No yogi who follows mystic yoga can control their senses the way a devotee who surrendered to a spiritual master. You will notice that Haridas Thakur was surrendered to Mahaprabhu, and therefore a lady coming in the middle of the night did not disturb his consciousness. You will also note that Vishwamitra was trying very hard himself to control his senses, but he was so entrapped by distractions. So that's how I would answer your question. One more question here. We may say generally that my conscience is telling me not to do this or that. What does that conscience refer to? The conscience is very often the voice of the super soul, Manasakshi. Manasakshi actually refers to Paramatma within the heart. The super soul will never guide us in the wrong way. But if we do not follow the instructions of the Lord, then we go under the protection, so to speak, of Maya Shakti. And when Maya Shakti is there, we become implicated in this material world. That is why when one follows the instructions of the spiritual master is considered to be Paramatma without, and Paramatma within is the spiritual master within. So the voice of conscience will be the manifestation of the instructions of the spiritual master, and if we follow that, then we will hear Paramatma in our heart, because they are non-different. So that is one answer to your question. Next one, since Kapila Dev, Lord himself appeared, could Kadama Muni have stayed back? Well, Kadama Muni had to execute his duty. His duty was he had given a son to his wife, and his destiny was to leave the ashram. He was a self-realized soul, and he did not leave whimsically, Raghuveer Prabhu. He left by asking permission and consulting his son. And it was the desire of the Lord that the spiritual journey of Kadama Muni should be elsewhere, because you will read how he perfected his life and he left. So there is no loss in Kadama Muni's life because he left. It was not capricious, it was not whimsical, it was ordained and authorized by the Supreme Personality. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Dandavad.
Prabhuji, I have a question. Sometimes when you have a blindfolded love for Krishna, but you do not seem to remember the verses of the scriptures, however hard you try to, but in heart you love Krishna so much, are we in some way deviating from our spiritual master's instruction by not able to remember the verses properly?
Nice question. Straightforward answer, Mataji. The overriding principle of Krishna consciousness is that somehow or another we have to remember Krishna. Some of us may have an inclination to remember shlokas. Some of us may have not an inclination to remember shlokas no matter how much we try. Some of us may cook better for Krishna. Some of us may be very good with our hands for Krishna. Some of us are very bad with menial service. But the important thing is the principle. Are we doing what we can somehow or another to remember Krishna and follow the instructions? If our spiritual master has told us to learn shlokas and we find it difficult, do not be discouraged. Have faith that somehow or another the day will come when we will learn. The illiterate Brahmana was told to read the Gita, but factually he couldn't read it. But did he stop? He didn't stop. He continued trying to read the Gita. And that was his faith in the spiritual master. So if your spiritual master has given you the benediction to study verses, he will give you also the benediction to eventually be able to study them. But it doesn't mean we stop because we cannot do it. We persist, we persevere. And Krishna and the spiritual master are not interested in the results. Oh, I have learned the whole Bhagavad Gita. What's the point of learning all the shlokas if we don't act according to the shlokas? But we must never minimize the instruction of the spiritual master. And that's why it's so important to continue persevering. Does that help?
Yeah, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
So don't feel discouraged.
Sure, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you very much, Swayam Spurti Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu, for the wonderful class. And and as you were speaking, I was writing the notes, and I got a few points. Just I wanted to repeat in less than a minute. One of the point I liked that Devakinandan was taking the association of Kardama Muni as a devotee, not a husband. That's why the result was different, you know. And that's what we should remember in our material life also when we are dealing with each other. The second point is that we don't wait for Guru to come to us. Rather, we should run after Guru Maharaj to follow his instructions. And another point, you know, like in the context of Dehindra Pran Mano Dhyamyo, I have memorized the verse, Prabhu, like a parrot, you know, but I never realized the point what you said, that our senses have got conflicting demands, you know. They don't cooperate with each other, you know. So when our own senses don't cooperate with each other, so what can we expect from others? This and the last point, it's not the last, but the last that asad is not only temporary, but whatever is asad will always cheat us, and only Krishna is a sata, and Krishna will never cheat us. So we should try to be with Krishna as much as possible. And so thank you so much, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. One last thing, Swayam Spurti Prabhu. Sadashiv Prabhu asked a nice question. Many times we are really exhausted with sense gratification. We want to do bhakti, but it doesn't last long, and again we go back to sense gratification. Why is that? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says it is because of the weakness of the heart. It means that we still lack faith in Krishna. But it is not a disqualification. It is always a journey. Instead of becoming discouraged and giving up, again we should keep trying. The literate Brahmana never stopped reading the Gita. He never became discouraged and threw the Gita away and say, forget it, I can't read it. No. So we should not give up when sense gratification is trying to catch us. We should become determined, have faith. Let me try again. Let me try again. Krishna is Bhavagrahi Janardana. He sees the essence of our mentality. Result is in his hands. Don't be discouraged by the ups and downs of material life. By the end of our life, this sharir also will give us ups and downs before we die. But it doesn't mean that we are not clear about our destination. Let the clarity always be there. Persevere. Thank you, Sadashiv Prabhu. Thank you, Swayam Spurti Prabhu.
Prabhu, just one minute, you know, before we depart. Just now I got the message on mobile that His Holiness Bhakti Charusoi Maharaj health is very critical, and he has got a multi-organ failure. So probably you can speak 1 or 2 minutes about Bhakti Charu Maharaj and request all the devotees for intense prayers, Prabhu.
I saw my phone ringing many, many times, and I was fearing the worst. But let us take faith in Krishna, that he is completely under Krishna's lotus feet and surrender. He is Srila Prabhupada's great stalwart preacher and servant. Whatever the outcome that comes, Krishna knows best. And Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas will protect Maharaj's consciousness without fail. We should not become discouraged in these situations, because even in the challenges of the bodies, the Vaishnavas are showing us that their consciousness will always be intact. Let us continue praying. Let us continue chanting. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu. So we will end the session here now. Thank you again so much, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.